I'm Andrew Hemming, and today we're going to look at the topic of how can you tell if somebody's on drugs or not. Now, here's some of the classic possible signs of steroid use. And again, the key thing here is this word possible, okay? So this is not a guarantee, but this increases the likelihood that somebody's on steroids. So the first is people who have a rapid gain in size or strength, okay? That may indicate steroid use. Another one is acne. And so as we have an increase in testosterone, and I've seen this as a teenager with myself and many others, is that oftentimes you break out in acne, okay? And especially in the context of steroid use, we'll often see steroid users have giant big zits all over their back, and we call that backne, okay? Water retention is another possible sign. And then when the whites of the eye kind of yellow, okay? Now what's happening here is this can happen for many reasons, okay? And the yellowing of the whites of the eye indicates that the liver is not healthy. And so for individuals who use oral steroids, what we'll see is that the liver has to process oral steroids, and so as a result, it'll harm the liver, and so the whites of the eyes will turn a bit yellow. Okay, we'll see a fluctuation in size and strength. So when people are coming on and off steroid cycles, and there's this rapid gain in size or strength, and then the loss in size and strength, that can indicate some steroid use. Another one is stretch marks, particularly kind of like in the pec area here. If there's rapid muscle growth, you might see stretch marks happen there. Now that obviously stretch marks can happen because of weight gain. They can also happen because of pregnancy and things like that. But in those key areas, like say the pec area, that may indicate steroid use. Another one is voice changes. So guys typically will have their voice go up a little higher, and women will tend to get kind of a gruspier, kind of huskier voice when they're using steroids. Men will sometimes see what's called gynecomastia. And what happens here is that as we increase testosterone levels, the body tries to regulate its hormone levels because hormones are very precise. And so as a result of that, what can happen is guys will start to have an increase in estrogen level as well, which can cause an increase in breast tissue growth. Okay. And then long term as well, people using steroids tend to break down, okay? And we see accelerated aging. So they tend to look a little older than they are as a result of that. So again, these are possible signs that can indicate that. Now, the key thing to understand on this topic as well is that there are people out there who are 100% drug-free, lifetime naturals who look great, okay? And there are also people out there who use steroids and don't have impressive physiques, okay? So it's important to note that reality check. Now, let's talk about the area of drug testing. Okay? Drug testing has always been a catch-up game, right? Athletes are trying, using a drug, then the officials try to figure out a way they can test for that, and it's kind of always this catch-up game. Now, what can happen is the likeliness of somebody being on drugs can also be related to the type of testing used. And so if somebody is competing in a sport federation or a bodybuilding federation where there's no testing, then it's very likely that they're going to be on drugs. Okay? If somebody is in a federation where they're just looking at urine tests, okay, it's possible that people can still be using drugs and pass a urine test. And this has been done in bodybuilding, and this has been done in many, many shows. Okay? Then there's other shows, for example, and this is something I learned from Jason Gallant, okay, who has a great channel called Natural Gallant Bodybuilding, and he did a cool video a while back called Fake Natural Bodybuilding Shows, and he talked about his experience. Now, Jason was somebody who was an up-and-coming natural bodybuilding star when I was a youngster, and he mentioned that he competed in shows where they did both urine and polygraph tests, and he noticed that the guys in those shows, comparing them to the guys that were in just urine tested natural bodybuilding shows, that the guys in the just urine tests were about 20 to 30 pounds heavier, okay, than the guys who had to be passing both a urine and a polygraph test. Okay, so again, not a guarantee, but the more layers of testing we have, the greater likelihood that we actually have natural bodybuilders. Okay, now the key thing to note again is that there's always going to be people who are not natural that pass these tests, okay? But it decreases the likelihood with more tests, okay? And if you want to find out more, I've got Jason's video linked there as well. Another thing to consider here is the quality of the drug testing. And so obviously at the Olympic level, the drug testing quality could be higher than at a local bodybuilding show. Now, when it comes to the science of drug use, we'll look at some of the actual science, but before, let's talk about the internet hater science, okay? And I didn't come up with this, okay? I wish I did, and I don't know who did, so I can't give them credit, but here's how this works. If somebody's bigger than you, they're on drugs. If they're stronger than you, they're on drugs. If they're leaner than you, they're on drugs. And if they look better than you, then they are definitely on drugs. Okay? That's the internet hater science. Now, on the real science, we can look at what's called the fat-free mass index. Okay, and this is a formula that we take your fat-free mass in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Okay, and I got a link there to a website that you can take, and you just punch in the information, and you can figure that out for yourself if you're interested. Now, the key thing with the fat-free mass index, okay, is that because you are using your fat-free mass, you have to be able to accurately test your body composition in order to say, okay, if this is my body fat percentage and I weigh this much, I have this much fat mass, I have this much lean body mass, therefore I can use that in the formula. And so if you don't have accurate body fat testing and you're just guessing your lean body mass, then there's no way for you to know if this is going to be accurate for you or not. Now, the first study we saw on this was back in 1995, and what they did is they took 157 male athletes. Now, 83 of them they knew were on steroids, and then 74 of them were non-steroid users. And what they found is that the guys on steroids had a fat-free mass ranging from about 25 to 30, or maybe even a little bit more than 30. Okay, in the 74 non-users, they found a fat-free mass index limit of about 25. So none of the natural guys had a FFMI of over 25. They also looked at 20 of the Mr. America winners from what we call the pre-steroid era. Okay, and they estimated that these guys had a FFMI of about 25.4. So again, very close to the cutoff that they saw with the natural athletes. Now, some of the key things to recognize with the research, okay? First of all, we cannot make blanket statements based on 74 subjects, okay? And this happens all the time on the internet. People will kind of hear something and then they'll parrot that information. They'll just go around saying, oh yeah, research proves that you can't be over 25 FFMI and be natural, okay? And again, that idea proved, okay, is based on 74 people, okay? So is there a possibility that there's another person out there who is truly natural that has an FFMI of over 25? Possibly, okay? The other thing we want to consider is the idea of outliers. And this is what we miss when we look at research. And so there may be people that have no hope of ever getting to 25 FFMI drug-free. And there may be also people who are way more than that that could possibly be drug-free. We also have an issue with this research based on testosterone. So as I mentioned in the previous slide here, they did look at Mr. America winners in the pre-steroid era, which they said 1939 to 1959. Now, what we do know is that testosterone was first isolated in 1935, and it was available for medical use in 1939. Okay, so which begs the question, even though it was maybe not super likely, it's possible that bodybuilders in the pre-steroid era may have had access to testosterone. Another thing we want to look at here is, again, how we're assessing body composition. And so, as I mentioned before, there's many different ways to do this. The most common one that people will have access to is a bioelectrical impedance scale. So you might find this at a gym. You can actually purchase this, and you can have a unit at home. The other kind of more research kind of gold standard right now is DEXA. Okay, and one of the things that we see with some research is that if you're using the bioelectrical impedance scale, okay, it tends to underestimate your fat-free mass index compared to DEXA. Okay, and so again, how you do this is important. How you assess body composition is important to be able to accurately assess fat-free mass index. Now, more recently, we had a study done on football players. And what they did is they took 235 football players, some from Div 1, some from Div 2, and they used DEXA body composition, which is great. And they did find that they had 62 athletes that had a higher FFMI than 25. Okay? They noticed that it was also higher in Div 1 versus Div 2. And so, again, this may indicate that it's possible for somebody to do that. Okay? Now, another study that they did a couple years later looked at 209 male athletes from a variety of drug-tested sports. Okay? And so we do have drug testing in university sports, and so they look at several different sports, as I've listed there. They use DEXA body composition, and they found that on average, athletes had about 22.8 FFMI. Football was higher, cross-country was lower, no surprise. And then the upper limit was a rugby player who tested at 29.1. Okay? Now, when we look at this, there's a couple things to consider. First of all, as you move up in college sports, you're going to get really, really good genetics. Okay, and I've seen this. I was a university strength coach for 14 years, and I definitely had the chance to work with some really freaky athletes. Okay, and so you are going to get some genetic outliers. And again, the key thing when we're looking at research is that we're seeing averages, okay? And so we don't often see the outliers unless we really dive into the stats, okay? And so again, we don't want to be people who go around and parrot this idea that you cannot be over 25 and be drug-free, because we do see this with athletes. Now, on the flip side of that, we do know that there is drug use in college sports, okay? And so it is possible that some of these athletes, even though they were in drug-tested sports, it is possible, again, that they were using, okay? And so, again, that leaves this question open a bit more. So, to make this more practical, let's look at this. Let's look at your results. We're talking about your strength or how you look. If that's here, what are the factors that influence how you look and how you perform? Okay, so we obviously have drugs, as we've talked about, that is a factor, and it does allow you to build more muscle, to get stronger, to increase your performance, and so that is a factor. Now, if you're going to stay drug-free, that's awesome, okay? And so if we bypass that one now, let's look at these ones in red. And so we do have some things that you have no control over, okay? Your genetics, okay, is something that you can legitimately blame your parents for, okay? And your past environment, okay? The mentors, the coaching, the information you had access to in the past, you obviously cannot change that now, okay? But these factors in red do influence how you look, okay, and how you perform. Now, then we've got these other ones in blue here, like your leanness. Now, the reason this is in blue is that there is some element of leanness that is genetics, okay? However, there also can be a part that is lifestyle, okay? And the key thing with this is that when you're lean, oftentimes you will look bigger and more muscular. We see this in Hollywood all the time. You have actors get really lean for a role, and the average person will look at them on the big screen and go, wow, the guy's jacked. And then in real life, he's not a big guy at all. He's just simply lean, and they got a good camera angle. Related with that is body proportions. And again, there is a genetic component to body proportions, but there's also an element where how your proportions can make you seem bigger. So for example, guys who may have unnaturally big arms or big shoulders for their body, you can have relatively small guys with big arms or proportionally big shoulders that will look much bigger, and you'll think they're much bigger than they really are. Now we're going to move to the ones in green. And the reason these ones are in green is that these are ones that you have virtually or total control over. Okay, and these are going to have a massive influence on how you look. So the first is mindset. Okay, and this is a topic for another video that we'll look at in the future. But with your mindset, like I can usually tell in a very few minutes in a conversation with somebody whether they're going to be successful or not based on just their mindset. And so this is a really key one. Some people just have this mindset. They're like, yeah, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Other people, as soon as you make a suggestion or you answer one of their questions, they immediately come at you, oh, I can't do that. And that's an example of a mindset that's going to keep that person from achieving good results. Okay. Then we have effort, right? Some people just, they're just busting their butt and they work really, really hard. Okay. And we've seen this over and over. People who work hard get great results even when their program's not great. Okay. Consistency. Some people are just, week in, week out, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, they're consistently doing their eating and their training and everything, and they're doing really well. Your current environment, okay, the people you surround yourself, where you train, okay, where you get your information. This is all stuff that you can control that will have a massive impact on your results. Even a training partner, for example, can fall in that category. Your organization, okay, some people are they're really a mess, and before they could even look at having a strength coach work with them, they need to have a personal coach work with them to help get their life in order, because they're so chaotic and they're so disorganized that they can't eat consistently, they can't train consistently, they're a mess. Okay. On the flip side of that, I remember when I was doing some research for another article I wrote on the 10 lessons from the greatest bodybuilders of all time. I found that one of the things we see is that these pro bodybuilders, even though they got awesome genetics and they're they got the drugs and everything like that, they were so organized. And like if they were traveling places, they would actually ship food ahead of them, right? And you don't necessarily need to do that. But again, the key thing is that they're super, super organized in making sure that the important stuff of training and nutrition and rest happens. Okay, people who are diligent with tracking, right, so that they can figure out what's working for them, and they got their food tracked and their training tracked, their results tracked, and they can see how those variables all relate together. Passion is another one. Some people just love training, and it's a passion for them that never dies, and so they're consistently doing it because they just love it. okay? Your technique, and you can go to either extreme here. Some people are ego lifters where their technique is so horrible they have no chance of staying healthy and no chance of hitting the target muscle. And then on the other extreme of that, you'll have people who are technique geeks that never increase the weight because they're always trying to have this perfect textbook technique. Okay, so having good technique but still training hard is going to be where you want to do. Being on a great training program is important, right? Your lifestyle, your nutrition, your sleep, these things are hugely important, okay? And so recognizing, again, there's some factors you have zero control over, there's some factors you may have partial control over, and then there's a lot of things that will influence how you look that you do have control over. All right, so the best approach for you, stop comparing yourself to other people. Okay, this is not going to help you. Okay, also stop complaining about the few things that are totally outside of your control. Okay, such as your genetics or the environment that you grew up in. You can't change that, so just stop worrying about it. Okay, stop worrying about who is natural and who is not natural. Okay, because this can kind of be, it can be futile. It can kind of be like the dog chasing its tail, and it's not really going to help you get better. Okay, what you want to also be careful of is where you learn. And so we do have a problem in the industry with fake natties. We have people who are using drugs, yet not telling you that, or even blatantly lying and telling you that they're drug-free, and you think that their programs are amazing and their coaching is amazing, when in reality, they're fake natties. Okay? We also see people who could be lifetime drug-free that are total genetic outliers, right? And they, look amazing and they technically are drug-free. However, they don't necessarily know how to help you because, again, they're a genetic outlier. I also want to be careful of who people coach. And so one example I thought of as I was preparing this was the late John Meadows. And John Meadows was a great bodybuilding coach. He used steroids. He was very open and honest about that. But as a coach, he worked with a ton of athletes who were on drugs, and he also worked with a ton of athletes who were not on drugs. And so he was able to kind of see the differences and be able to effectively coach both. So consider who